Hi, this is Ben Kaiholtz, back to spend a little time with you as a follow-up to the film we did about a month ago. I'm joined by Ross Buckendahl, another one of our superintendents from Blue Star Resort and Golf, and of course, a lot of you know Gus Rhoda. He's been here for the last few weeks, leading the team and trying to make as much progress as we can. So, what we're going to do is a quick follow-up on the conversation we had then, and then get into some new subjects as well. So, without further ado, Ross, you've got a core. You pulled it. We're standing on 3 green right now. Give me the good news, the bad news. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, we took a core here from kind of the same areas as we did last time. We kind of did this get together, and unfortunately, the bad news is there's not there's still the Bermuda grass suppression in this core. We're not seeing much life at all, which we kind of anticipated early on. We're continuing to do the things of aerification, spraying, fertilizer programs, getting on the right track, building that foundation, and we're not seeing the Bermuda grass growth that we had anticipated. We kind of assume that, to be frank with you, Ben, that a lot of these greens, 1, 3, 5, are going to have to go to the route of sod.
Okay.
They're just that Bermuda grass has.
It's not there.
It's not there. It's been kind of a self-inflicted wound, if you will,
Yeah.
on our part, and on as, but. Yeah.
When you say our part, you mean the club over the course of time. There were some choices made that maybe didn't.
Exactly.
Okay.
There were some choices made, over years, couple years, and kind of leaves us with where we're at today. And
So what do we say? We're on 3. Obviously you picked a spot that was relatively bare, but I mean there's plenty to choose from. What we are seeing right now, which is the treatments we've been doing, have actually generated some level of growth in the places where we either had existing plants, and we even gotten lucky and got some new plants to start. But that's what's creating the kind of pocky feel of it, where it's just like you get some that is super healthy and some is still dirt. At the end of this thing, 1, 2, 3, 5, 9, I'm probably forgetting 17, 11, 17.
Yes, sir.
We're probably ending up with most of those, our recommendation is going to end up being resod.
correct.
We've had a little bit of good news on
Yeah.
9.
Yeah.
And we've had some kind of a little bit of good news on all of them, but not enough where it's not just like, hey guys, like we'll wait for a year and a half to get back to where we need to be,
Yeah.
something to putt on. Okay, so that's where our stance is right now, and I'm assuming we're going to do the best we can. I guess, Gus, you're leaving at the end of the week. Thank you, by the way, for all the work.
Yes.
And Ross, you working with Andreas. We're going to do the best we can to get the best surface we can for Invitational. But ultimately, man, we know the end of the story.
Yeah. It is, and like you said, Ben, the cultural practices, the fertilization program that we are doing, it's encouraging to see that with the POA Triv that we have, it's working. It's getting nutrients, it's getting water, it's getting the stuff into the soil and building the foundation. As a new superintendent comes into here, hopefully that foundation can be continued. And I know it sucks to putt on. It sucks. It's terrible because of the difference of, nothing to healthier.
Yeah.
POA Triv creates, like you said, a bigger pocket to putt on. But yeah, we'll focus on irrigation, like you said, getting the roll, the absolute best that we possibly can for tournaments coming up, events coming up. And still focusing on, the cultural practices and continuing on with that as well.
All right, so that's the news. So that's fair, and I think I don't think there's many members that are going to be surprised to hear we've got work ahead of us.
Yes.
So let's transition, I think, a little bit. So we'll stay with greens because there's also been a discussion of how much progress we can make with just irrigation practices, changing heads. Under the current greens construction, the push-up setup, what is our ceiling? How good? Let's assume that we get these resodded, that we make the right choices, that we get things set up the right way. How does our ceiling in a push-up environment and our floor, I guess, compare to our ceiling and floor were the club to choose to invest in, say, rebuilding with USGA spec? Is it what I'm illustrating here, where they're never the lowest point they'll be is always better than the lowest point they'd be push up, and the ceiling is much higher. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or am I oversimplifying?
No, I don't think you're oversimplifying at all. I think that if you would continue on with a push-up green,
Okay.
you can get a push-up green in this state that we currently have now to very, very good. You can get it to very, very good. It takes a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of work to continue on. And once that work is quote unquote finished,
Yeah.
it's never finished. Does that make sense?
Okay.
It's with a push-up green, it's a constant aerification. I maybe even said this last time too, is where I'm at currently have push-up greens, and we are aerifying every month, every 3 weeks.
Okay.
Every 3 weeks we're on a rotation of aerifying, because the push-up greens have more of a tendency to seal off.
That's a small tine, not full
Yep,
cores, but
kind of
a
like
small
what we
tine.
have
Yeah.
now. Yeah, exactly.
But it's still poking holes.
But it's still poking holes. It's letting them breathe. It's getting water, nutrients, everything down, deeper for those roots to penetrate and get and find that water. So we have a good, healthy root system. Now, USGA spec green, that's kind of an ideal situation, right? Like you have drainage, you have consistency throughout. That's the perfect situation. Now, with that being said, we still have trees to deal with,
Yeah.
we still have shade issues. Whether it's USGA or push-up greens, we're still going to have issues that need to be addressed. If we put a USGA green on here and thought it was just going to be perfect, we're thinking out of the
And I think that's your take, right, Gus? Which is that, look, that would be helpful. You obviously, the club you're at has USGA spec greens.
For sure.
But your take is it's not only that. There
No.
are other things that need to be looked at, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
For
Okay.
sure.
So, I mean, look, the club's going to make that evaluation, and I'm sure when we're asked, we'll provide the thoughts, but I'm glad we clarified that. Okay, so let's talk through, I think, a couple other things as just a guy who's been playing, Gus, questions I've been having. So we've, particularly in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I know the weather's been variable, but we have been seeing like way wetter and way drier spots than I'm typically used to seeing this time of year. So can you walk us through kind of why that's been happening?
Also, you guys got a new irrigation system, central control, before I got here, but it's really new. It's the latest, greatest Rainbird system. But we weren't running, we were still just telling the system how many minutes to run. You guys got a weather station that you paid a lot of money for as well, that will tell the computer exactly how much the plant lost and how much to water. So we've switched to running through with the ET, is what it's called, evapotranspiration. And that's telling the heads. Now, so instead of us telling the heads to run 7 minutes, 4 minutes, the computer's telling it, and we're just going to have to tweak.
Okay.
It's putting out more water than we want in some spots, less than we want in other spots. And that won't just be, that will be a never-ending process. It is, at every golf course, you're always tweaking the irrigation. But we just made that switch after the Ladies Invitational, and we're trying to catch up, for lack of better terms.
And this is not, so this transition from like, again, if you're just a backyard guy, you just put the number of minutes in and it goes, right? So transitioning from that to this kind of automated system, which is, we say automated, but not real. I mean, you still have to have some human input.
For sure.
That's not unusual, right? So this will be something that we're tweaking. And I know we had conversations about flow amounts, and we're also understanding piping more.
For sure.
This is what our irrigation consultants and potentially like an irrigation staff would be helping us remedy over the course of time. Is that right, Ross? Because we have this, maybe you and I were having a conversation earlier about just the fundamental irrigation system.
Yes.
Can you just talk through that again of, hey, look, everything's got a useful life, but you could extend, and maybe just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's like Gus said, making that transition to the ET, watering from the ET is making the irrigation system we have the most efficient it can be. Because when we first came in here, across the board on the computer system, it was 10 minutes across the board. And what was being done is the irrigators were going out, turning on heads where it was dry, making that difference, which is great. but it's not efficient. So we're wasting and using man hours every morning, 3-4 guys, you know, that could be doing other projects. So making that change and that transition will create wet spots, will create dry spots until they're tweaked. So it's a long process. It's a hard, long process, 6 months, 4 or 5 guys, you know, daily going through and making these irrigation changes, but will have a tremendous difference. I did the same thing at the club 3 years ago that I'm at. Same thing, 10 minutes across the board. And we're now getting into the point where it's fully automated, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, we can go in, we know we have 5 or 6 heads on each golf course that we know kind of just have to be touched up a little bit. And there's a lot of low hanging branches. There's a lot of other obstructions from irrigation heads that create dry spots because the heads aren't hitting them.
Yeah.
So it's a constant thing. You go through once, you just start right back over and go through again.
So we're not, and I want to be clear, man, I'm like, we're reporting, not editorializing, but I think what is important to understand is in the current setup we have, there is so much manual manipulation that we are losing the ability to do a lot of the other detail work. Like, so if you just say simple, oh, hey, we got an 18 guy crew, we have 16 guys, right? Is that what it is? We have a 16 guy crew. People go, well, 16 guys, that seems not that, that seems like plenty, unless you have a third of them doing manual work every single day that actually should be automated.
Manual irrigation work to make up the differences for the inefficiencies of the computer.
So if you're playing chess versus checkers, like you're going to want to play a couple moves ahead and set up the system, which is painful right now because there's wet spots that are annoying, but you pay that price, and you maybe pay the price with an irrigation partner to come in and like allocate people to come in and do this, but then you're all of a sudden opening up all of this man time that we can use to do all the other things that I know we'd all love to be doing, because I mean, obviously there's a million detail pieces out here that I think we'd like to address, and you've been experiencing that too, Gus, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that is so, and then ultimately, look, I think we are not blind to the idea, and we agree that over the course of time, I mean, golf courses can't run on the same irrigation system forever. There is some useful life to this thing, but we can buy considerable time with some of these kind of more moderate investments. Is that correct?
Yes, I think so.
And the more you tweak, the more you may find out, oh, this, these certain laterals can't handle this. You know what I mean? But that's what has to be, dived into, I guess, if that's a word. Sorry. And figured out over, like Ross said, over, initially for quite a time, but then you'll always just be tweaking it a little bit.
And I think, talking about that too, you will buy some time. You can buy years of time with the current system that's in place. Now, like you said too, where, golf course irrigation typically has a lifespan of 20 to 30 years. That's a typical thing. So I believe this is quite a bit older than that. So it's an upgrade is in the future. I believe that. But in the interim, making these tweaks that Gus has already started with the ET, finding laterals that run on the same thing. What he meant by that was, if you have 2 to 3 heads running on the same irrigation line, that line isn't big enough to pressurize all 3 heads. So therefore you have less pressure. So you're not throwing head to head. So you're throwing shorter, which is creating a wet spot. And then also
a dry spot.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's what you have to really dive into and try to separate them if you can. A lot of these are on 2 heads run at one time off of 1 wire, if you will.
Okay.
So it's hard to delineate the difference between those two. But if we can minimize that as much as possible, again, making it more efficient for people to do other things in the mornings.
Okay. And then, because I want to be conscious of time, we went long last time. So I'm assuming that over the course of this week, Gus, we've got you again. I want to thank you for coming down, man. I know that this is more of usually a hunting period for you and getting to relax with your dog. So thanks for doing that. I'm assuming you guys are spending time together and you're running through tees, fairways, greens, roughs, all the things that you go through from a kind of a transition. Andreas has been a good partner.
Yep.
So that's been our assistant superintendent for that people that don't know. And you guys are going to spend the week together figuring that out. Kirk's not here this morning, but Kirk also plays a role in that from our team.
Absolutely.
And you're going to come in with, hey, look, let's just keep the momentum going.
Yep.
And we are trying to continue to work with third parties where we can. Sounds like we had West Coast come out on the turf side.
Yep.
We've got other people, Marvin, that's been out here on the irrigation side. So we're going to keep pushing that.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Correct.
Okay. As far as I think the obvious question, which I'm not the perfect person to answer, but I'll answer it. I think Phil might be addressing in a letter. While all of this is happening, the board has been interviewing and reviewing resumes from superintendents, and our goal is to have the smoothest transition possible. I am not aware of any candidates that we're really close on, but I know the conversations that have been going on. So my impression is that Phil and Craig, leading the Grounds and Greens Committee, are working to get a superintendent in as soon as we can, assuming we can get the right person here. So in the interim, Ross, you're going to be here. Gus, you're a phone call away.
Yes, sir.
We've got other resources here in town, so we're going to try to make sure that we're moving everything we can. But we don't see an environment, superintendent or otherwise, if they need to get sodded, they're going to get sodded.
Yeah.
If the irrigation needs to get worked on, it's going to get worked on.
Yep.
And we're going to keep solving this. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
100%.
Okay. So anything else that there's a million things we could chat about, but are there other things that we think are important to share with the membership? Gus, you've been happy with the team. People are working hard, all that stuff.
Indeed. We've replaced the heads, the irrigation heads on the bad greens 1, 3, 5. I'm sorry, 1, 2, 3. You guys know the ones. With part circle rainbird heads, the latest, greatest heads, and we've re-nozzled them. We've ordered for the rest of the greens, the other 11 greens. We've ordered the exact same heads, not the with the appropriate nozzles. We expect them this anytime. So either I or Ross will get those in the ground as soon as they show up, which will help just more control on the greens. We know where the water's going. So
that's a big deal, right? I mean, that's kind of step one.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Ross, any other thoughts you have kind of coming in, or anything you think's important to share?
No, not really. You know, a lot of people that know me, I'm big on irrigation. That's the number one thing. Just and just kind of following with what Gus has started, and start tweaking those. What we'll try to do, I'm hoping is come in and where we have wet spots, dry spots, maybe take one hole and spend a good 3-4 days on that hole and get it quote unquote dialed in.
Yeah.
So people can kind of have an idea of what it's going to be like going forward. Maybe we take hole, whatever the worst one is, whatever, I don't know, 9 or 8 or something, 13, and dial that one in and put the amount of water that needs to go out, and kind of give people a feel and an idea of what the rest of the golf course is going to look like. Again, continuing with the cultural practices, keeping things going, building a foundation. It's tough. Over the last 5-6 weeks, it's tough to see because on the surface, nothing visually is changing, but we are changing a lot underneath the soil that needed to be changed for quite a while. And not only setting up for the next 4 or 5 months, but setting up for the next 4 or 5 years, trying to set that foundation up in order to give the best product. So when we, again, we're going to have to sod some of these areas. We want the best seed bed or the best sod bed that we can possibly have going in.
And you said earlier, just to close up, if you were like, this is not actually concerning. Like this bottom part, like the soil structure we have down here, the amount of air that's getting down there. The problem is the part that's up here should just have a whole bunch of roots in it.
Should be filled with roots.
So we may, like in a sodded environment, like we have a decent root bed or a decent soil bed to work with if we had plant.
If we had plant, this is, there's good particle size in here, with the continuing of the aerification, getting that to drain, it's good. There's really, nothing wrong here. You don't see any layering.
Okay.
It's a good soil. That's, good 4 or 5 inches down into there too. So, and that's usually the root mass area, if you will. Below that, we took cores last time. It's kind of consistent all the way through. So I see nothing wrong with this, especially in a push-up green. I see nothing wrong with that at all.
All right, and I'm going to go to one last thing, and I might just summarize, which is I know that we had discussed last time that the density, the amount of plant we put, the seed we put down in the fall also could create an issue on the back end when we transition into Bermuda. So like 12 is super, super dense. 15 is super, super dense. We don't know yet. Like the aerification we're doing should be helping there,
For sure.
but we just haven't had the warmth to get a sense if that is or is not going to be an issue. Is that correct?
Yeah, and we'll start. We've got some kind of tournament next Monday. That after that, we're going to start doing transitioning. Start mechanically removing, brooming and grooming those greens. So
Okay.
to give them the best chance. But there's certainly a lot more poetriv on them right now than we'd like to see.
Okay. All right. Well, look, I appreciate this. Probably in a little. We were trying to shoot for 10 minutes. We probably overshot that a bit, but I appreciate everyone's patience, and I hope everyone learned a little bit. I know I did, and we'll see you around the club. Thanks so much. Thanks again, Gus.
You bet.
Thanks again, Ross. Man, it's nice to know that we have people who can make good choices out here. So I appreciate y'all being there.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.